Why don't you deal more with Christian apologetics, Dewayne? I don't know. Bores me. I've never had any trouble believing in God. I mean, to me, that is the most ridiculous conversation that a person could ever have is there a God? Now, that doesn't mean that that's the way you see it or that it's even the way you should see it. It's just the way I've seen it. I've never asked myself if there is a God. And I've gone through some difficult, dark times just like you have. I've wondered about things that he allows and things that go on in this world just like you have. But I've just never struggled with the reality of God's existence. To me, that is the most obvious fact in the universe. I've also never had a problem with Jesus because since I've read the Gospels, my life has been changed by this man. And I did go and study some of the historical evidence for the resurrection to help other people, because even though we know there's a God by just observing the natural order, I believe if anyone is honest with the evidence that you see around you on every side, you'll know that there is a higher being. The God of the Bible is one that has to be understood through Jesus. So I will dabble in some Christian apologetics to help those people. But the problem I have is when it comes to things like that, it's just I'm not interested in it. Now, there are a lot of great Christian apologists out there who have already done the work. They love to study and talk about that kind of stuff. And those questions that people have, I think they serve a purpose. I've had people say, well, you know, when you're dealing with someone who has a mental block about something, scientifically, you need to be able to deal with that. Well, there are people who deal with that. I don't really think you have a scientific block about it. I think you have a philosophical block about it. I think the fact is you just don't like God and that you don't want anybody telling you what to do. I don't think that you have any trouble believing in God. But I have been wrong before, and I may be wrong about that. And there are a lot of tools out there that can help you with that. But here's where I'm coming from. Acts 17, Paul stood before a group of people who did not know anything about the God of the Bible, and he went into no Christian apologetics arguments. You know what he told them? The day is coming when God has appointed a day in which he would judge the world in righteousness and commands all men everywhere to repent. Here were people who didn't know anything about Jesus, and Paul told them to repent. Repent of what? What were they supposed to repent of? Not accepting the one true God. He didn't go into a long list of arguments for God's existence. He said, you already know. Deep down, you already know who God is, and he told them to repent. That's kind of the way I look at it, but I don't stone people who disagree with me. It's just the way where I'm coming from. It's hard for me to get excited about something I have no interest in. Another thing is, you remember when Doubting Thomas, that's where he got his name. It's not really fair. They were all doubters. They all doubted at one time. But the one disciple who gets the bad rap is Thomas, because when Jesus appeared to the apostles, Thomas wasn't there. Now, they all were struggling with unbelief. They were locked up in a room with they were afraid. They were afraid. They shouldn't have been afraid. And they didn't even believe the women who came from the tomb and told them Jesus has been raised. The 12 apostles, or the 11 apostles, didn't believe him. And Thomas came back, and after Jesus appeared to the apostles, now they're ready to believe. And Thomas says, well, unless I see the scars in his side, unless I see for myself, I won't believe based on anything you people have told me. So later on, Jesus appears again, and he says, come here, Thomas. Here's the scar in my side where they pierced him with a sword. Here's the scars in my hands from where they nailed me to the cross. This is really me. And Thomas worshiped him and said, my Lord and my God. All right, that tells you right there, Jesus is God. Jesus didn't stop him. If Jesus was a good man but wasn't God, he would have said, wait a minute, you don't worship me. Every time somebody tried to worship an angel or tried to worship the apostles, they said, no. You don't do that. You only worship God. But when they worship Jesus, he never stopped them because he is God. And Thomas was right. He said, my Lord and my God. How could I have not believed in you? But then Jesus said this, Thomas, you've seen and believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed. It's far more impressive to God, in other words, when you just take what is obvious and just accept it rather than saying, no, I got to have this question answered, and I've got to have this question answered, and I've got to have this question answered. If you'll just trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding, as Proverbs 3, 5, and 6 says, that will be far more impressive to God than saying, I've got to have some evidence. Now, that doesn't mean you can't be saved if you are one of these that wants to look at scientific evidence. The facts are there. There's historical evidence that Jesus lived. There's tremendous historical evidence for the resurrection that you need to look into, and I'll talk about that sometime. Eyewitness testimony, for example, 12 men who gave their lives saying, we saw him. That's strong. You can't argue with that. You can't ignore that. But the person who just says, you know what, I'm not going to get into all that. I know Jesus is real. There's no way a fictional character could have changed the lives of so many people, divided time into. I'm just gonna humble myself before him, and whether I understand him or not, I'm going to give him my heart and my life. That's the one Jesus will say, that's what I'm looking for right there. So you keep that in mind. If apologetics is your thing, there's a lot of stuff out there And we may dabble in it from time to time, but for the most part, I really don't have a whole lot of interest in it.